Good evening and welcome to the Kwedu Report. Joining you from Sydney, Australia, my name is Harry. Tonight we return to a tragedy that has gripped the Kenyan diaspora and ignited an unprecedented diplomatic push for answers here in Sydney, Australia. In early April 2026, 25-year-old Sheila Chebii left her home in Eldoret, Kenya, full of hope, promise, bound for Sydney to pursue higher education. But today, her family remains in agony, unable to bring their loved one back home. Following the discovery of her body at a luxury hotel on May 17th, a grieving family and a mobilized community are fiercely challenging the official narrative provided by authorities. On Sunday, we at the Kwedu Report received a formal response from the New South Wales Police, and we will now examine the mounting pressure from the streets to the halls of the High Commission for a full criminal investigation into this matter. Now, Sheila was employed at the Meriton suits on Sussex Street in Sydney. Now, on Sunday, May the 17th, emergency services were called to the building at approximately 1:30 p.m. following reports that she had fallen from the 19th floor to a 4th floor balcony. Despite the efforts of staff who attended CPR, Sheila was pronounced dead at the scene. Now, on Sunday, in response to an inquiry by the Kwedu News, a spokesperson for the New South Wales Police Force provided the following statement. Officers attached to Sydney Police Area Command continue to prepare a report for the information of the coroner. Detectives have conducted extensive inquiries, including securing witness statements and collating CCTV from within and outside the building. At this time, there is no evidence to indicate anyone else is involved. However, detectives urge anyone with information to contact Day Street Police Station. The spokesman further noted that police are continuing to liaise with Sheila's family and consulate staff. However, for those closest to Sheila, these assurances are not enough. The family maintains that the timeline and physical evidence do not align with a simple fall, citing specific injuries, including bruising and a fractured hip, that they argue point to a struggle, not a tragic incident. In addition, the family has also publicized phone records indicating Sheila was actively communicating with them via mobile at 12:30 p.m. on May the 17th, the exact time currently noted as her time of death. Now, beyond the police investigation, the family's frustration remains directed at hotel management. They describe a wall of silence, alleging that the employer has failed to provide clear accounts of her final hours or address the breakdown in safety protocols. The family is asking the painful fundamental question. In a high security luxury establishment, how can an employee vanish from her station and die on the job, allegedly unmonitored by CCTV in critical areas? For the grieving family, corporate transparency is not just a courtesy, it is a necessity for closure. Now, the management at Meriton Hotel in Sydney have not responded to inquiries sent to them by Kwedu News on this matter. Now, Sheila's voice is not being silenced, and her case has now reached the highest levels of diplomatic engagement. Following the community's outcry, the Kenyan High Commission in Canberra has stepped in officially, seizing the matter. In a formal press statement, the Commission confirmed that they are working closely with the Australian law enforcement agencies and the Coroner's Court to ensure a thorough investigation into the matter. The Commission have also pledged their full consular support to the family, acting as the primary bridge between the grieving relatives in Eldoret and authorities in Sydney. And building on that diplomatic momentum, the Diaspora is preparing for their next major action. After staging a protest last week, organizers have announced another protest scheduled for this coming Tuesday, 2nd of June. The community plans to march directly to the Meriton Sussex Street suits. Their message is very clear. They will maintain maximum public pressure on both corporate management and New South Wales authorities until they are satisfied that a full, transparent criminal investigation is guaranteed. Now, as the investigation enters its third week, Sheila's remains are still held by forensic pathologists awaiting final autopsy and toxicology results. A life of immense promise, silenced far too soon. The Kwedu Report will be on the ground to ensure this story remains in the light and to provide all the latest updates as they unfold. In other news, in the DRC, a group of young men stormed a hospital treating Ebola patients to demand bodies of their next of kin as the Ebola virus continued to ravage Eastern Africa. The attack came amid rising Ebola fears, with officials reporting 904 suspected cases and 119 suspected deaths in northeastern Congo. On Sunday, angry young men stormed Mongubwalu General Hospital, forcing medical staff to evacuate patients as gunfire erupted while attackers demanded 2 bodies of their kin to be handed over. Congolese authorities banned funeral gatherings exceeding 50 people on Friday and mandated officials to manage burials because bodies remain highly contagious and can spread the Ebola virus. The Congolese Ministry of Communication reported 904 suspected Ebola cases, a jump from 700, with suspected deaths totaling 119 to 220. As the World Health Organization said, the outbreak poses a very high risk for the Congo. Now, Saturday's attack on a Doctors Without Borders tent and Thursday's Rwambara Treatment Center fire left 18 patients with suspected Ebola infections unaccounted for, compounding the medical challenges prevailing in the region. In a related development, a court in Kenya has blocked a US Ebola quarantine facility plan. A high court in Kenya has temporarily blocked a Trump administration plan to establish a military-backed Ebola quarantine facility for American citizens, issuing an urgent injunction just as the site was scheduled to begin operations. Now, the proposed 50-bed makeshift field hospital was built at the Laikipia Air Base in Kenya, intended to be managed by US military and public health service staff to isolate Americans exposed to a dangerous outbreak of the Bundibugyo Ebola virus in the neighboring DRC. Now, Kenyan High Court Judge Justice Patricia Nyaundi barred the Kenyan government from operationalizing the facility and blocked the entry of any infected or exposed individuals, enforcing a freeze until full legal petitions can be formally heard on the 2nd of June. The legal challenges were filed independently by the Katiba Institute and the Law Society of Kenya, which accused the government of Kenya of cutting a deal in absolute secrecy without public participation, parliamentary oversight, or proper biosecurity safeguards. Now, The plan ignited a fierce domestic backlash in Kenya, including a 48-hour strike notice from the Kenyan Doctors Union, whose leaders have publicly condemned the deal and stated that the country should not be used as a foreign dumping ground for a lethal pathogen that the US has allegedly refused to bring to its own soil. Now, as the Ebola continues to ravage the Congo and Eastern Africa, experts have warned of a link to eating wild animals. Now, the Congolese government has confirmed more than 1,000 suspected cases of the Ebola virus and at least 220 deaths since declaring an Ebola outbreak on May 15th. Now, the Bundibugyo virus, which is a rare strain lacking approved vaccines, has continued to be a menace in eastern DRC, while the demand for wild meat from the Congo Basin persists, with an estimated 4.5 million tons extracted annually as the primary source of animal protein for many residents in the region. Now, you can see that in places like the Masina market in Kinshasa, vendors like Charles Ndanga, they can be seen selling wild game, including rodents, priced at about $17 per kilogram. Now, while authorities do not impose a ban on wildlife sales, see, this shows a total disregard of the dangers posed by this particular practice. Now, a very concerning situation there in eastern DRC caused by the Ebola virus. Now, the Ebola virus has also affected countries like Uganda and the DRC, as well as Kenya. In a related development, World Health Organization chief has landed in Congo to address the rare Ebola outbreak amid distrust and insecurity. Now, on Thursday, World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus called for an urgent, immediate ceasefire in the Democratic Republic of Congo to facilitate the humanitarian response to a surging Ebola outbreak. Now, the outbreak that involves the rare Bundibugyo virus, which lacks approved vaccines, has been a real menace in the region. We now go to Sudan, where a commander who was filmed killing civilians is now back in combat after being released from prison. Reuters spoke to sources who said the commander, who was freed after videos showed him executing unarmed civilians. Now, Brigadier General al-Fatah Abdullah Idris, known as Abululu, has been released from prison and returned to active duty in Kordofan. Authorities detained Abululu in late October 2025 following the RSF takeover of North Darfur, where verified videos show him executing at least 15 unarmed captives, earning him the nickname the Butcher of al-Fashir. According to three sources, Deputy Commander Abdel Rahim Degalo ordered Abululu's release via radio message, bypassing official channels after he appeared before a 6-officer disciplinary board in November. Now, despite official denials from the RSF-led Tassis government, spokesperson Ahmed Tegudu Lisan, who claims Abululu remains in custody, 2 eyewitnesses report seeing him on the Kordofan battlefield in March. With UN probes finding more than 6,000 people were killed by RSF fighters during the al-Fashir offensive, the UN Security Council sanctioned Abululu for human rights abuses, raising questions about international accountability on this particular matter. Meanwhile, in a related development, the United Arab Emirates has been accused of training Colombian mercenaries for Sudan's war. Now, on Tuesday, Human Rights Watch accused the United Arab Emirates of training hundreds of Colombian mercenaries at military facilities near Abu Dhabi before deploying them to fight alongside Sudan's rapid support forces. Now, Sudan's 3-year-old conflict began in April 2023 when a military power struggle with the RSF erupted in Khartoum. The RSF emerged from Arab Janjaweed militias notorious for the early 2000s Darfur atrocities and has faced accusations of war crimes and crimes against humanity. An unnamed Colombian mercenary told Human Rights Watch he trained RSF recruits at camps in South Darfur in April last year, while UN experts documented that mercenaries operated drones, artillery, and armored vehicles across Khartoum, Durman, Darfur, and Kordofan. The UAE's foreign ministry has meanwhile denied the allegations to the Associated Press, stating that the country does not permit recruitment or training of foreign fighters. Emirate authorities and the Abu Dhabi-based Global Security Services Group declined to respond to Human Rights Watch's request for comment. The Human Rights Watch has called on the European Union, meanwhile, to suspend military cooperation with the UAE, while Maouzi Segan urged countries to reject the Gulf states' denials. The US has already sanctioned the Bogota-based firms over mercenary recruitment as Sudan's death toll reaches at least 59,000 over 3 years. Now we go to West Africa, Ghana, where the country's parliament has passed a bill criminalizing the promotion of LGBTQ activities. The measure adds prison terms for advocacy and support, deepening criticism from rights groups that say it threatens free expression. Now, on Friday, Ghana passed a bill imposing prison terms of up to 10 years for promoting LGBTQ activities, reviving efforts to criminalize advocacy and support in the West African nation. Now, before this bill, Ghana criminalized same-sex sexual relations under Section 104 of the Criminal Offences Act through an earlier version passed in 2024, but was never signed by President Nana Akufo-Addo. Now, the legislation mandates 3 years of prison for engaging in same-sex acts and 5 years for operating a brothel, while banning promoting, sponsoring, or advocating LGBTQ activities. President John Dramani Mahama of Ghana is expected to sign the bill into law, despite finance ministries warning that enactment could jeopardize billions of dollars in international financing. While Human Rights Watch condemned the bill for violating constitutional rights, such measures continue to enjoy popular support in many conservative African countries, where more than 30 of the 54 countries in Africa criminalize same-sex acts. Now, going to Southern Africa, to Zimbabwe, where Zimbabwean nurses are forced to travel hundreds of kilometers to Harare, the capital city, just to register. Now, the Nurses Council of Zimbabwe has been urged to urgently decentralize its operations and establish provincial offices to ease the burden on nurses forced to travel long distances to Harare for registration services, with the Deputy Minister of Health and Child Care, Slayman Timyo Squidini, demanding timelines for the process to begin. Now, speaking during the International Day of Midwives commemorations held recently on Friday at the United Bulawayo hospitals, Squidini openly criticized the resistance to change within some parastatals and professional government councils. Now, we also briefly look at how Zimbabwe got China to pour in billions of dollars into value-added lithium investments in the Southern African countries. Now, Zimbabwe, since banning the export of raw lithium concentrates and all raw and unbeneficiated minerals, has received up to $1 billion in investments for processing plants. Zimbabwe banned the export of raw lithium and unbeneficiated minerals, resulting in nearly $1 billion in investments for local processing of lithium. The first lithium sulfate shipment from Zimbabwe was exported in April, marking a milestone as the first such product from both the country and the African continent. Now, lithium sales surged in 2026 with volumes rising 2% and value increasing 106% year over year, highlighting strong global demand and government policy impact. Now, a clear example of this was when Sichuan Yahoo Industrial Group of China announced the construction of a lithium plant in Zimbabwe, the third such project in the country. Now, in our last story, loopholes in equipment hire costs seat of Bulawayo millions of dollars. That's the second largest seat in Zimbabwe. The Bulawayo City Council could be losing a lot of revenue after an audit unearthed a number of irregularities in its hire of plant and equipment processes, which could result in fraudulent activities in the hiring process. Now, according to a council confidential report, the audit discovered that the engineering services department, under whose purview the hiring of plant and equipment falls, does not have a documented policy on hiring of plant and equipment. We noted that under the current system, the process of hiring plant and equipment is the prerogative of user sections instead of transport superintendent. Now, user sections maintain contract documents and general correspondence pertaining to hired plant and equipment, with the transport superintendent having no role in the process, reads part of the audit. It was further discovered that the audit was unable to verify the accuracy of billings for some plants hire from some companies, where they noted this could create conditions that may give rise to fraudulent activities within the council. We were unable to verify the accuracy of billings from some plants hired from Sembule Transport, Care Construction, Craig Penham, and Masters Specialists. The roads yard section was unable to provide supporting documentation in the form of payment rates, hire terms and conditions, number of hours. The audit report further added. Now, in our last story in Australia, One Nation has overtaken Labour as Australia's most popular party in a new poll. In a massive political disruption, new polling has pegged One Nation as the new most popular party in the country, leapfrogging Labour in primary support. Now, the latest Australian Financial Review Redbridge Group Accent Research poll revealed primary support for One Nation had jumped 4 percentage points to 31% since the pre-budget poll a month ago. Meanwhile, Labour's primary vote fell 3 points to 28%, and the coalition dipped further to 20%. Despite this, Labour continues to lead One Nation on a two-party preferred basis, but the gap has narrowed from 10 points to just 51 to 49%. Redbridge director Tony Berry told the AFR that the poll believed the country was heading in the wrong direction, helping to explain the One Nation surge. Now, these are the stories that we have for you tonight on the Kwedu Report. Thank you very much for joining us for this edition. Till we meet again in the next edition of the Kwedu Report. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the Kwedu Report. You can follow us on our Facebook page, Instagram, on YouTube, and on X, as well as TikTok. You can also read all the latest news on our website, news.hericommedia.com. That's the only way you can support independent media. Thank you very much for joining us on the Kwedu Report, where we say your story is our story. Asante. Have a good night.